You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctors In podcast, and this is episode 133. And today we want to talk about, something that we had talked about a few years ago on a presentation that we did, and it's something that you and I had talked quite a bit about before that. And the name of the presentation was titled The Road from Health to Disease. And essentially, we've kind of found four specific or distinct stages that happen as a person goes from being healthy to being diseased. And of course, the premise that you and I use for a lot of things is the idea that you don't go to bed healthy tonight and wake up with a disease tomorrow. You use the analogy of breast cancer, for example, to show that. So maybe you want to...
Well, in breast cancer, for example, by the time they'll say traditional medicine will say, have a mammogram and do self-examination. And listen, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. What I am saying is by the time you detect something that you could actually feel, ladies, in your breast tissue, that cancer, they get a biopsy done and they say, oh, by the way, you got cancer. That cancer has been there for at least 5 years, probably 10. Because if you look at a pen and you just look at the tip of a ballpoint pen, I mean, you know how small that is. For cancer to grow to that size in breast tissue or in prostate or whatever takes 5 years for the tip of a ballpoint pen. You and I are into big time into prevention of disease. And I think, folks, this podcast you will find fascinating as we talk about how you go from healthy. So if you woke up, for example, and this week you felt fairly good, next week felt a little lump in your breast tissue, whatever, you go get a biopsy, and the doc calls you back. When a doctor calls you back, it's always bad news.
Especially in Canada, it's never. They don't.
You know what I mean? Yeah, they're calling you back. It's never good. Hey, we want to see you in the office, and then it's bad, and then they come and say, well, got cancer. Well, you think, well, geez, a month ago I didn't have cancer. Yes, you did, right? You had cancer a long time ago. You just didn't realize it because you weren't aware of the clues that your body was giving you. Now, that's
one of my kind of pet peeves a little bit. You kind of hit on it just a few minutes ago, just the way that our system is set up. And I understand it. I'm not going to criticize the system that we're in any way. We got a lot of benefits to our system. But, one of the frustrating thing is that a lot of times people go for these tests and the doctor or the nurse will say, well, you hear from us if there's a problem. And most of the time, because there's no problem, you don't hear from them. But I kind of like the old-fashioned, hey, let's go through your results. And they can they don't do that anymore in a sense. They don't go through and say, well, these kind of numbers are a little bit high or these are a little, but that's not how it works anymore. It's just like, that's how it works. But anyways, that's just one of my pet peeves. Now, we should probably start off by saying that it's actually a really good thing that you don't go to bed tonight and wake up with a disease tomorrow. I mean, that'd be a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? If you picked up a disease in a matter of going to bed at nighttime or in a matter of a day where you went from being completely healthy to disease within 24 hours, that'd be a bad thing. I mean, that'd be terrible. And because you don't go to bed healthy today and wake up diseased tomorrow, like, for example, a person, and this is an analogy that we use also, a person can go to the doctor, and then all of a sudden the doctor says, I had your blood tested, you're now a diabetic. Well, right before that diagnosis, like 2 weeks before that, they were still diabetic. Now, the numbers might not have been such that they were technically diabetic, but the body was giving them a lot of clues that they were going to be diabetic pretty soon, like officially diagnosed as diabetes. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about. So you don't go to bed healthy, wake up diseased tomorrow, and the body will give you clues all along that journey. So as you go from health to disease, the body will give you clues. And depending on the stage that you're in, your body will give you different clues. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, and this is just kind of something that we observed by going through a lot of patient visits, a lot of stuff over the years, and we've kind of broken this down into kind of 4 steps from healthy to disease. And that's what we'll talk about on today's episode.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you mentioned as well, like we talk a lot about prevention, right? We talk a lot about prevention, but let's be honest, for a lot of people, prevention is boring, right? It's like, you and I know this, we wrote a book on cancer, specifically, Are You Built for Cancer? And the book did well, but we always found that people are not really interested in talking about cancer
unless they have it.
Until they get it,
yeah.
Right? Because, we're kind of immune today. I showed a study a while ago in a newsletter that we did where pretty much everything causes cancer because there's so many factors. So the word cancer is used a lot today. So we kind of tune it out when it comes to preventing. I'll do this to prevent cancer. A lot of us tune it out. That's normal. That word's used a ton. There's so much health information out there. But all of a sudden, if we get cancer or we're worried about cancer or some kind of symptoms we're getting, then our search history in Google is full of cancer searches. Then we're interested. And then we want to talk prevention. And so the stuff we're going to talk about today is kind of way before that. But we'll go through all the different steps along the way. So let's talk about that. Now, obviously, the first step is health. We wrote a blog about this a while ago, is what is the true definition of health? Because it's actually it makes for an interesting discussion. Because depending on who you ask, you're going to get a whole bunch of different types of answers. I mean, really, you think it's an easy thing to define health? What does it mean to be healthy? It's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of doctors will define health really as the absence of disease or symptoms. So if you don't have any symptoms or you don't have any disease, you're healthy. Even though, as you mentioned, things can take a long time to develop, it doesn't mean that the person's healthy. They may have biomarkers that are screaming that there's a problem coming, but the blood testing or the symptoms they're getting just doesn't really mean anything, and so they're healthy. So that's one of the problems with healthy, right? And then you for example, talk to a fitness industry professional. They can't imagine somebody being healthy if they don't have abs.
Perfect body, right?
Yeah. And then you and I know that's how many people do you see that are in that industry that aren't healthy at all? They got no energy, they're not sleeping. I mean, all those kind of things, right? So it's a difficult thing to define, is what does it mean to be healthy? However, there's a few things that we think have to be included in the definition of health that you and I have kind of talked about, because we've kind of talked about this a little bit. If you were to define what a healthy person is, what is it? And aside from the lack of symptoms, a healthy person has very good energy.
They should.
They should have, right? I mean, I always kind of give you as an example, right? You're in your mid-60s, and you have great energy.
How did you know that?
Well, because I play sports with you. You have good energy. Energy's never been your thing. You sleep well, right?
And I'm a big baby if I don't.
Well, but again, the more research that's being done on sleeping and the circadian rhythm, a healthy person has good energy, a healthy person sleeps, and they feel restful when they wake up.
Yeah.
That's a sign of good sleep.
Have a good digestive tract.
Have a good digestive system. So we can go on talking about...
But energy is a real key, isn't it? I mean, the first question when I go in, without even looking at their charts, when I see my patients, first thing that I ask them, I'm 10 out of 10 energy, and I point to them and say, okay, what are you? Give me a subjective number. Where are you at? And you always, it's amazing, almost, I mean, there's a few people that come in because they're coming in strictly to see where they're at. But there's the vast majority of the people that I see, even though they haven't been diagnosed with any kind of disease at all, for a lot of them, the clue is, you know what, doc? I'm exhausted, or I'm 5 out of 10, or I'm 2 out of 10, or,
And that brings us to kind of that second step. So the first step as a person is healthy. The second step, or the second stage, is what we call well-being is threatened. This is where, as you mentioned, they start to notice their energy is not what it used to be. They notice they're gaining weight or they're losing weight. Mm-hmm. Usually, though, gaining weight because the hormones are starting to tell them that something's going on. This is when they start to not sleep as well, or their brain not quite as sharp. This is really the subjective stage, meaning nothing will show up in any standardized blood testing yet, but the person doesn't feel well. And this is a frustrating stage for people because they go to their doctor and they can't find anything. They run all these tests and the numbers are good. So the doctor pats them on the back and says, hey, man, everything's good. Yet the person doesn't feel good. They feel tired. They're not sleeping well. Yeah. So it's a frustrating stage, right?
And that's where, I mean, you know, when you look back at how you and I have developed the Martin Clinic in the sense that the biomarkers have come out, and this is where we're, stage 2 really is where we like, look, we can get you at stage 1 even better, where you're actually feeling really good, no symptoms, and energy is good. But generally, our biomarkers were made for this stage. Stage 2, nothing shows up.
Yeah, something
generally
is,
in the traditional testing, right?
It's kind of early on in the stage, right? You're not diseased, but you're heading down that path, and that's kind of how we built our biomarker testing, to kind of look at things that we think are very important that give us a good heads up that something's off. And what I like is this. If your energy's low, if you're not feeling well, like your energy's not what it used to be, and yet your blood tests are normal, our biomarker system will pick something up. Yeah. There's something off somewhere, right? I mean, and that's the thing. But the stage 2 is kind of that stage that a lot of people are like, I just don't feel like I used to feel. Something's off. And that's kind of stage 2, right? Stage 3 is now what we call diagnosable symptoms. So what do we mean by that? So a person is in stage 3 when all of a sudden now they got a diagnosable symptom. For example, hey, you got high blood pressure. Your blood pressure is high. That's a diagnosable symptom, right? That's an indication that things are going in the wrong direction.
Body screaming at you.
Yeah, and that's basically, and this is kind of another analogy that you and I like to use. Is stage 1 is like whatever you like to hear music-wise, it's like humming perfectly, right? I was going to say opera, but I don't like the opera myself, so it would not be something that would soothe me. But imagine stage 1 is just kind of like everything's going well. Stage 2, the music's getting a little louder. Stage 3 is when it's screaming at you, and stage 4 is like they stop playing.
Yeah,
but we'll get into that now. So stage 3, that's what we mean by diagnosable symptoms. So, for example, high blood pressure. People in stage 3 have high blood pressure, or they can have hormone that's off. You know, a lot of people in stage 3 have hormonal issues. They go get tested and the hormones are off. Now, what's interesting is that even though they get on the medication, it usually doesn't fix the problem because there's something else going on by this point. Yeah. Because stage 3 is stage 3. It's not stage 2. There's something else going on there. But so like high blood pressure, this is when their blood sugars might be starting to get high, or they may have high insulin, or they may be starting to think of all the things that can show up here. But that's what's going on in stage 3. They have diagnosable symptoms. And usually somebody in stage 3 is when they start taking medications. This is when their doc says, you know, you got high cholesterol, which, again, don't get us started on high cholesterol. But you got high cholesterol, or you got high blood pressure, you better get on this blood pressure medication, or your thyroid's off, you better take this Synthroid.
You got acid reflux, and you're going to...
Well, that's another one.
You know, that's
exactly.
a big one. The body's screaming at you. We could spend a whole time doing one on acid reflux, because we see so much of that.
Now, and that's the thing, right? So let's use the example of high blood pressure and why it's stage 3, not stage 2. Well, as a person goes from health and they start to not feel as well, they don't start with high blood pressure right away. High blood pressure takes a while to develop. And consistent. I mean, everybody's pressure might go up if they're under a stressful situation, but I'm saying like chronically diagnosable high blood pressure.
You have hypertension?
Yeah, and that
didn't come overnight.
No, that's right. And if we've done this before, but if you were to reverse engineer high blood pressure is a symptom of high circulating insulin.
Absolutely. It's part of the metabolic syndrome.
In 99% of the people, high blood pressure is an indication they got high circulating insulin. So high blood pressure is a diagnosable symptom indicating something that's happened beforehand. And in stage 2, and that's the thing. So if you were to look at the stages from a biochemistry standpoint, is in stage 2 is when things like insulin starts to elevate, cortisol starts to elevate, inflammation starts to get higher,
free radical damage,
and those are all things that we check in our biomarker stuff because it's like, oh, they're starting to get elevated.
Your leaky gut.
Exactly, and if you leave those things going for a long time, then you end up with a diagnosable symptom. You leave your insulin high for a long time, you may get high blood pressure. Somebody else may get a different symptom altogether, but that's what ends up happening. So that's stage 3. Now, somewhere between stage 3 and stage 4 is what we call the now or never zone. You go from not having a disease to all of a sudden you get something tested and they're like, man, you got type 2 diabetes, or you have now heart disease, or you have a disease of some kind. And that takes place after, again, it's a process that occurs, right? And the reason why the stages is important to understand is because how you approach a condition varies on the stage that they're in. Mm-hmm. Somebody who's in stage 4, which is disease, has to be a lot more serious about how they approach things. They're eating, they can't cheat the same way somebody can in stage 2. There's certain things that you recommend or people recommend that they have to do. If they don't, they're diseased. Stage 3, you can be a little bit, it's not free, but you have less restrictions, or you have less. Stage 2, it's ideal to catch things. People that move in and out of stage 1 and 2 throughout their lives. And stage 2 is where you want to catch everything. And then you can, then it's easier. You just have a few corrections. It's not life-altering necessarily. You can go in there, make a few changes, and that's kind of where you live, in a sense. You like to live in stage 2 because you can pick things up so long before they start, and that's your strength.
Yeah.
When we talk a lot about prevention, we talk a lot of times with people in stage 2. They already starting to feel off a little bit. In a perfect world, we could, everybody's in stage 1. They're feeling good, and they get checked out, and they want to stay that way. And if there's anything deficient, they fix it before it even turns into a stage 2 problem.
Yeah.
But that's how, from a big picture point of view, how we look at the progression from health to disease. And then we kind of slot people in on that scale. Where are they on that scale, right? They may have some things are in stage 3, but some things in stage 2 because the body is, like they may have, for example, high blood pressure from high circulating insulin, but they're also starting to develop some other things as a result of the domino effect from that.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, when you're at, I always say when you're at stage 3 generally, sometimes I'll tell a patient in stage 2, but generally at stage 3, now your body's screaming at you. And I tell them at that stage, I said, listen, you're on the Titanic, you're heading towards an iceberg, and you better turn the ship around. Because it's now, like you said, if you're in stage 4, we are very strict. I mean, if you want to reverse this thing, you got to really, there's no cheating, and you got to follow exactly what we do. But if you're in stage 3, it's a real warning to people. Like, you know what? You're heading for disaster, but you haven't hit that iceberg yet. Turn the ship around. This is where it's amazing your body, what it can do. If you give it the tools, if people, and the reason we do the podcast, the reason that we do the emails, the reason we do Facebook, I always tell people, look, we have a vested interest in people. We try and educate people so that they can make choices. We educate so that they can understand, look, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be a biochemist. We got that part figured out. But what we want you to do is understand where you're at, where your body's at. And then, okay, now you know. And I love, what charges my batteries, especially, and I get this every day, right? People that come in for their follow-up visit, first follow-up or maybe second follow-up, and you know what? I'm giving them a high five because they realized where they were at, and they went and they complied. They just said, you know what, Doc? I bought it. I understood what you were telling me. I had a guy this week, just to give you a little illustration. He came in and I said, look, you are diabetic. You got sugar in your urine. Oh, my doctor said I'm not. I said, look, you are, and you have been for a long time. You have to get rid of the carbs in your life. You mean I got to stop drinking Pepsi? I said, yeah, you got to stop drinking Pepsi because you are an inch away from disaster in your body. Well, you know what? I didn't see him now for 6 weeks, right? So then he comes back, okay? So this is the second time. And he said, Doc, you scared the life out of me. I said, I did? I said, I meant to. He said, but you know what? You changed my life. Because he went home. He sat down and he realized that he was just fooling himself, right? And now he just took it seriously. He changed his diet. It was amazing. And he couldn't believe just how much better he felt. But you see, for us, he understood. He bought it. He understood, look, health, folks. Listen, the reason we do what we do is because we're passionate, because, listen, the responsibility for changing is you. It's not us. Like us, we coach, we tell you we love the background stuff.
Yeah, you're not going home with them.
We can't go home with them.
Now, some people have asked if you can come home with them and just make sure that everything they're doing is good.
But you know what? This is why we're here. Is there any clinic anywhere? And I don't want to just toot our horn. But the reason we set up the Martin Clinic the way we do is that we want people to, well, first of all, communicate with us. I always tell look, you got any questions, you get back. We have people, our staff are trained. We're trained. We want to be able to give you answers to your questions because we want you to invest. Your investment is time, it's energy, it's, you invest in your health and your body will give you the dividends of that investment.
And the return on investment is there, right? If they invest in their health, the return on investment is usually immediate, and once you start to see a difference, it makes it that much easier to continue to do it. And listen, as you mentioned, the fuel that we get from people telling us how well they're doing and how good they feel, and I mean we call that that's our gasoline, right? That fuels us when we get that. So we get a lot of testimonials, and we love it. We read them. We keep them all in a folder. We like to have that kind of stuff. And our staff likes to hear that stuff as well, right? They're always coming in and letting us know, oh, so-and-so, they went and saw their doctor. They're not diabetic anymore. But anyways, yeah. Yep. So I hope this episode helped kind of take a step back and kind of look at the progress that happens from healthy to disease. And then also understand, if you can understand this, that your body's going to give you clues all the way through. Very rarely does somebody say, I had no idea something was wrong. That does happen. But if they were to sit back and look and they say, my energy had been dipping.
I was under a lot of stress. You know what? Just to give you an example, when we get patients come in and they fill out a questionnaire, because sometimes they go, Doc, you asked me a lot of questions there. I said, well, listen, you got inside information, but I said, I'll tell you something. We're cause and effect. We always use that example, right? I said, if you got this, it's amazing that you can go back. I'll give you an example of a lady I had in my office today. First time I'd seen her, and she got breast cancer about 5 years ago, and she was one that's, sort of took pretty good care of herself. And she, she looked like somebody that meant business when it comes to taking care of herself. And, she said, Doc, I was shocked when I got cancer. I said, can I ask you a little bit of history? Were you under a lot of stress? Maybe a year or two before that diagnosis? Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. She said, oh, man. Well, you know what this lady did? She had lost her husband suddenly. Just almost died on the spot. She said, can you imagine? Yeah. She was young. They had kids and blah,
stress
blah, blah.
Kills.
And guess what? Yeah. A few years later, breast cancer. You think that came out of nowhere?
No, and you think of the study that was done showing that high stress, the effect it has on your microbiome, right? So think of the first change in a lot of diseases is leaky gut, and we talked about that in our book a long time ago. But so think of a high stress, not even the effect it has on your hormonal system, the effect it has on your blood sugar levels, and the effect it has on insulin, because cortisol raises blood sugar. Yeah. So stress raises your blood sugar. So you got to secrete insulin to lower it and keep it normal, right? So it raises insulin. So think of, and breast cancer is a highly insulin sensitive.
And estrogen.
And estrogen sensitive, which again, there's a relationship there with insulin.
The relationship is unreal.
And that's exactly our point, that there's a cause and effect, and things just don't happen by accident in a lot of ways when it comes to chronic health, right? So again, we trust that you got some good information from this episode. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, go to our website, martinclinic.com, and sign up for our newsletters. We go through a lot of studies. We break them down. We kind of try to make it as practical as possible. Also, you do a live Facebook every Thursday morning.
Thursday morning, 8:30.
And, a lot of people ask you a ton of questions. You'll answer whatever question they ask you then. So there's a lot of ways that you can get your questions answered. And as I mentioned, if you're not a newsletter subscriber, that's a great way to interact with us. And we also got live chat on our website, and our staff's very good at watching that, and they're on there. So there's a lot of ways to get your questions answered. So again, we want to thank you for listening, and have a great day.